What is going on, my fellow geeks, and welcome back to Raving Geeks.
I do have a media recommendation.
I love Lord of the Rings. Superheroes, movies, a little jack of all trades, I guess.
So what makes me a geek?
What is going on, my fellow geeks, and welcome back to Raving Geeks, the weekly pop culture podcast from Central Michigan Life, where we discuss all things geek culture, which is like high culture, but better. If this is your first time joining us, make sure you follow the CM Life Instagram and Twitter pages for updates on the podcast, and look for us wherever you find your podcasts, including YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and on our website at www.cm-life.com. My name is Brendan Valentine. You killed my father. Prepare to die. And I'd like to thank you all for joining me and my fellow co-hosts this week, who will introduce themselves in a second with our question of the week. So, our question of the week came in from a fan, and I will read it word for word here. So, let's say you have a bare wall that needs to be decorated. Fathead will make anything that you want. What character would you pick from a book, comic, or movie, and why to decorate that wall? So, one character to decorate the entire wall. So I have two answers. One is not a real answer. The other is kind of a real answer. My first one is Martian Manhunter, but since he can shapeshift into anyone and anything, then that kind of like is a cop out, and I can just get anything of anyone. And that's probably what I would go for if that didn't break one of the genie's rules that is granting me this wish. But other than that, I'm trying to think. Like I tried to think of like characters that I think have like diverse like costumes and things that I can like have like some really cool like in comic or in movie shots. And I gotta go with Spider-Man just because after playing the Spider-Man PlayStation games, I actually haven't played them. I've watched people play them. There's tons of different costumes to use, and there's like a bunch of really iconic comic panels that you could like base uh, stuff off of. And you got the like mid-air like pose that looks really cool. And like I know it's kind of a cliche, but I have to go with Spider-Man just because of the diversity in costume and just how cool Spider-Man poses.
All right. My name is Isaac Hunter. I love Spider-Man. That's a brilliant idea. I kind of just like pictured that like one of like that famous Spider-Man like comic cover where he's like holding the crook and like flying through and there's like a broken wall. When you first said Martian Manhunter, I love Martian Manhunter, but for some reason I pictured Marvin Martian from Looney Tunes, and I was like, wow, what an odd choice. I was like, this guy though. I mean, I'm sure he kind of can. They all can. Those are some good choices. I also kind of thought in the range of almost like a shape shifting type thing because I would want Jake the dog from Adventure Time, but I would want him like with his arms like super stretched and like overlapping and maybe his legs, and he's just kind of like what having a fun time. Only because I think it'd be like horrendous to have to like actually physically make that cardboard big head thing. Especially if it's all one piece of giant cardboard. But I think that looks so cool on a wall where it's like going, and if even if it can go onto the other walls, I just think that looks super cool. Yeah.
All right. Hey everyone, I'm Hope Gutteral. I'm gonna stick with MCU theme here. Not go with Spider-Man. I do love him. But you also said the iconic Spider-Man pose, and after just watching Black Widow, I immediately thought of Yelena going like, what's with this pose? You're such a poser, like doing it. And I was like, wait, Spider-Man kind of does that pose too. And I don't know. He doesn't do the hair flip though, because Peter Parker doesn't have long hair to flip.
It's the spider pose.
True, because she is Black Widow.
Mhm.
But I'm going with Bucky, and I'm going with the 40s Bucky, where we have the slightly tilted hat that he has for being sergeant in the war, and possibly even the one where he is the sniper and saves Captain America's ass from getting shot. Or anything to do with from Falcon and Winter Soldier, like with his new uniform, I guess so is what to call it.
Bucky's going through an emo phase.
Yeah, but like it just
He's
fits
always
because
been
it
in an
matches
emo
with his
phase.
arm. It matches the arm and everything. Like it just looks aesthetically pleasing. So those are my choices.
Nice. Perfect. So thank you all very much. Now to get things started, we'd like to share some quick geek news per usual. So, either you got anything juicy for us this week?
I'll start while we're on the topic of the MCU. So, about a week and a half ago, and by the time this releases, it'll be about like 2.5 weeks. Marvel released the story of Marvel Studios, the making of the cinematic universe, which is it's a book. And it kind of is just like a large compendium of a bunch of different stuff. Like obviously information was making the movies, but it's got like quotes and sections from actors and directors. And apparently there's a large heartfelt afterword at the end of the book written by Robert Downey Jr. And he wrote this, I think, in 2018 is what it said, but basically it's about like, like the end of the MCU, like his like end of his stint in the MCU. And he kind of just talks about the dream project that it was, it coming together. Basically the moment that like Jon Favreau was sitting by him with the Pepper Potts actress, whose name escapes me.
Gwyneth Paltrow.
Gwyneth Paltrow. And then like Jon Favreau's like, this is gonna work. And it's just kind of like really cool. And apparently it's like 1,000 words. So I've only read some of the highlights, but he kind of talks about when the other actors come in and like how like for Avengers it really started to become something special. And then like as it gets bigger, he is even like talking about how like the next, like I guess like the next guard, if they're the old guard, like the new guard coming in, like Spider-Man and Paul Rudd, stuff like that. And I just think it's really cool. So anyone, and I mean, we're all fans of Robert Downey Jr., so worth the read.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay. Yeah, I'll go next instead of last for once. Keeping on the Marvel's track, Entertainment Weekly has actually announced that Rotten Tomatoes is not a fan of the Eternals. To quote what they wrote, Eternals bypasses Thor: The Dark World as lowest rated MCU movie on Rotten Tomatoes. So just for the record, Eternals has not come out yet. So this is all just critics being critics. And we all know Rotten Tomatoes typically isn't the best place to look for movies, because there is a lot of times that like they'll have a really low score on Rotten Tomatoes, but then the audiences actually love it. So take it with a grain of salt and just know that Rotten Tomatoes sometimes is really critical of anything that comes out. On a better note, for fans of Legally Blonde, which the last movie came out in 2002, there's going to be a third Legally Blonde. And it is being written by Mindy Kaling and Dan Gore. Mindy Project.
The Office.
The Office. Couldn't remember if it was The Office or Parks and Rec. But she and Reese Witherspoon previously worked together in A Wrinkle in Time. So Reese is like very excited to work with her and like very confident in her abilities. And so also, besides just starring in the film, Reese Witherspoon would also be producing it with her production company, Hello Sunshine. So the plot is still like unknown because script is still being written. But so far, Jennifer Coolidge, who was Paulette, is coming back, as well as Reese Witherspoon. They're assuming Emmett is coming back because obviously they're married. So Luke Wilson will have to take a break from Stargirl to go film Legally Blonde 3. And he's actually said he would love to go and like film another Legally Blonde. So but
I forgot that was Luke Wilson. I love him. He's such a good actor.
He is. I love him. I will say, unfortunately, the original Bowser is not going to be in the movie. He passed away in 2016, I think. Maybe it was 2018. I don't remember which, but it was one of those. But I mean, it's Elle Woods. Of course, she's going to have a dog of some sort, whether it's Bowser Jr. or anything else, because I think in Legally Blondes, with an S at the end, with the two British twins from Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, I think they both got Chihuahuas that were like Bowser's nephews or something like that, or like related to Bowser somehow. But so to quote from Mindy Kaling is that Elle Woods is such an iconic character and so loved. Ordinarily, I think I would not find that really fun to do, but because of the expectations that are set. But because we haven't seen the character in 18 years, I was excited. We know what Elle was like when she was 21 and 22 years old, but what about when she's 42? That character, so innocent and girly, what is she like when she's dealing with adult problems and is an adult woman? She's not a little girl anymore. And Reese Witherspoon has said that it's going to be so much fun, so full of fashion, so full of awesome feminist ideas. It'll be global. It will have animals, and it will have returning cast members. They just need to film it first. So original release date was going to be in May of next year, but they haven't started filming yet, so that's likely going to be pushed. But I'm assuming if they were shooting for May of 2022, that they're going to try and keep it within the 2022 year, hopefully. But it'll depend on when they can start filming. So,
Well, all I have to say is that if Elle Woods doesn't become a Supreme Court justice by the end of that film, then I will be upset. That's my prediction right now.
Here,
Elle Woods for the Supreme Court. Awesome. Well, I guess that just leaves me. And I also have an MCU update. We got a second trailer for Spider-Man No Way Home. For some reason, they're calling it Uncharted, but yeah. No, so the trailer for the Uncharted movie, which is a video game series, has released with Tom Holland playing, oh geez, Nathan Drake.
Nathan Drake, there you
Nathan
go.
Drake. Yeah, no, I was like, what? I knew the last name was Drake. I'm like, no way, I'm not forgetting the name. So, playing Nathan Drake.
The
trailer's really
non-gamer actually remembers the name of a game character? What?
It's been a while since I played Uncharted, and I don't own the game. I've only played it at friends' houses.
Excuses.
Yeah, excuses when I haven't fully played the game. But yeah. So the trailer looks really good. Lots of big names in the movie. It's still relatively recent. Highly recommend if you haven't gone and checked it out, going to check it out. Also, a couple of updates. I've let a few things fly under the rug, and that's my bad. But a couple of updates on all the Star Wars series. So the next upcoming Star Wars series is the Book of Boba Fett, starting on December 29th of this year. So it won't be till the very end, but it will be coming out this year, barring any major delays. Production on The Mandalorian season 3 has also been going on since late September. So we have that to look forward to. And then there's been a couple of casting updates for both the Kenobi series and the Ahsoka series, with Rosario Dawson confirming that Hayden Christensen will be making an appearance in the Ahsoka series, which I'm really excited for. The fact that they're casting Hayden Christensen makes me think there's going to be flashbacks, as he's also in the Kenobi series. There's probably going to either be flashbacks to the Clone Wars, or there's going to be like some, maybe not Force Ghost, but like there's a reason they need Hayden Christensen and not just Hayden Christensen's voice in the Star Wars, in
like,
the Vader suit, or anything like that.
Maybe like mental like images almost.
Yeah, maybe
not like dream sequences, but like a force connection.
Force projections.
Yeah, that'd be pretty sick.
I'm really excited for that. So I can, what's it called? Speculate for days on what's going to happen in the Kenobi series, but yeah, they've got I can't find it now, but they have updated some casting things, and what is his name? I just clicked on it. Oh well. But anyway, lots of Star Wars updates. And yeah. This is technically Level Up Chips' territory, but also we've gotten a lot of updates for Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. Sorry, there's lots of adjectives. And Pokemon Legends Arceus, with the announcement of a Hisuian, Zora, and Zoroark. And I'm super excited for Pokemon Legends Arceus. I really want to play Breath of the Wild, but with Pokemon. and they're keeping it under wraps, the idea of like legendary Pokemon, but like it's called Pokemon Legends Arceus. Like the odds that you don't at least see Arceus and go up to the top of Mount Coronet pretty low. I will let Mike and them, if they want to talk about it more. But I just need to keep everyone updated there. So moving on to our main discussion of the evening. We have another piece of news. As of the day of this being recorded, Disney has released the Lightyear teaser trailer, for the film, not about the toy that we all know and love from Toy Story, but about the character that toy is based on from the movie within Toy Story. So basically, what happens in the trailers, we see a lot of shots of some distant planet. It doesn't look like Earth, it could be, but if it is like Earth, it's like post-dramatic climate change Earth. Um, and then a lot of like just general like spacesuit, space adventure shots that look like it's a pretty cool animation style. Um, and we also we don't get to see him, but we get like some allusions to Zurg, who I'm very excited to see fleshed out as an actual
Yeah.
villain. Which I'm like, instead of just the toy version, I also want to see with this animation style what Zurg looks like, because the toy looks kind of silly, but they have to make him look at least a little menacing
Yeah, and I
in
mean,
this
and
movie.
the real question is, and this is possible spoiler territory, on Toy Story 2, and also if I'm right, but if they continue that route from Toy Story 2, where Zurg is Buzz's father,
Father, yeah.
I will be so excited.
I wonder if they're gonna pull any like Star Warsy spoofs, because that's what that was based off of, was
Yeah,
the Luke, I am your father whole thing. And I'm
Buzz,
like, I
you
wonder,
coming? No, I'm gonna play catch with my dad.
Dad. Ah, like that's definitely something they could do, and I wonder if like they'll make Zurg more of like an anti-hero like, oh, he's my dad. There's a bigger threat to stop together. And that could be pretty cool. So yeah, I think
That happens. Can we get Chris Evans's dad to voice his dad?
What if we get Tim Allen to play Zurg?
Oh yes, I love that.
oh, that'd be so sick. Oh, Tim Allen is Zurg. Hmm. I wonder, Tim Allen must like somehow play some kind of role.
He's
Like,
gotta. Or my guess is maybe like at the end there will be a commercial for like the toy of Buzz Lightyear, and then they're like, press the buttons, and then it's like his voice.
yeah, I was wondering, I was thinking there might be like an end credit scene. It is Disney. I know this might be like dumb, but like Wreck-It Ralph had one, so like Pixar could throw in an end credit scene.
Okay, Wreck-It Ralph was a freaking Rickroll. Come on.
Yeah, but I don't know. They still had like an end credit scene, so like it's not like unprecedented that
No,
it's in there.
but they got to get Tim Allen in as is Santa Claus. That's it.
It's
Just have
like,
Santa Claus introducing the Buzz Lightyear toy.
or just maybe Santa goes to space.
Space Santa, I'll pay for that. For those
Yeah.
children on other planets, I mean, come Christmas time, the North Pole, he's going to be making, if
Not
there
only-
is colonization on other planets, Santa's going to have to get to those other planets as well.
Good point. But anyway, with the end credit scene, I would love to see like a trailer for the Lightyear movie, and then maybe like young Andy being like, "Oh my gosh, we have to go see that!" Like that would be really funny. Like I know, like nothing really related to the actual movie, but I thought that would be entertaining and fun, and I would really hope for that. I don't know if that's the direction, or if what kind of cameos they're gonna expose to the original Toy Story film, but I think that'd be really cool. The one thing from the trailer that I was like disappointed we didn't get to hear more of was Chris Evans voicing Buzz Lightyear. We only get kind of half a line.
Yeah.
Like at the very end, they're like, "Yeah, to infinity," and then he goes, and like that's all we hear. I want to hear Chris Evans be Buzz Lightyear a little more. But and they're holding their cards close to their chest, because they know if they reveal too much now, then. But whatever. I still wanted to hear a little bit more of his voice acting, but all in good time. But the one thing that we thought was really interesting, beyond just the film itself, is the way that Pixar presented it, saying that this is a story that we've wanted to tell and we've always known kind of existed ever since we made Toy Story, because there is this backstory and this movie uh, within the Toy Story universe that, creates Buzz Lightyear. And then we're like, oh, that's not the first time this has happened where there have been stories within stories. So we just kind of wanted to talk about those stories within stories, whether it's in TV shows, books, films, things like that. I know, Isaac, you had mentioned that there's another Toy Story universe adjacent um, story within a story that you'd like to see as a sequel to Lightyear.
Yes. I'm just saying that if we're getting this story about the TV show that Buzz Lightyear is based on, then why don't we already, cash out on those on the already made Woody's Roundup TV show featured in Toy Story 2. Again, fantastic Toy Story movie. Which is about, not Buzz, Woody and Jesse and Bullseye and the Prospector. And they only had one episode, but I just think that I would totally see that movie.
I think they could feasibly make it as a Disney Plus show. Like, what like make it like 60s, probably like cowboy-ish, like John Wayne like film type broken up into like an animated show for kids, similar to the way they did like Doug Days.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
that,
We
I
need
feel
more
like
westerns.
we do need more westerns, but like modernized westerns that
Yeah.
like aren't just about like shooting the bad guy, but a little more about exploring the country and making your own life in unfamiliar territory. They could combine the two and have a space western.
Ooh, like Cowboys versus Aliens.
Yes, but not as cringy as Cowboys versus Aliens.
Right.
I mean, like you could. Oh my gosh! Imagine in the Toy Story universe a toy like a in-universe crossover between the Lightyear film and Woody's Roundup, because as two of the most popular toys of all time, and like, ooh, all this whole time Woody was on an alien planet that was similar to Earth that Buzz Lightyear comes to.
Ooh, now I want to see like in the Lightyear movie, like if there's like like recruits that are chilling in like their base or whatever, they have like a VHS of of Woody's Roundup, and they're like, "Oh,
Oh,
there's
that'd be
something from
so.
home."
Dude, how can you imagine how meta that gets? Like we've got the series that exists in the real world that exists in this movie that is played in the real world or real world of Toy Story, which is a story that we tell. Dude, imagine
What?
if we're a story in someone else's story right now.
Oh my gosh. A real meta moment would be if the company that designs the spacesuit that's based on, the Buzz Lightyear suit is called like Andy Incorporated, and then they slap that name at the bottom of the boot of the suit.
That's not where I thought you were going with that, but I like that much better. I thought you were going to say the people that manufacture the suit are by and large like that company that shows up everywhere in all the Pixar movies.
Actually, that'd be actually very feasible.
Because I mean, we have to relate it to the Pixar theory somehow. I mean, it's within the Toy Story universe, but maybe Lightyear is a true story about when humans were a spacefaring species, and that is no longer the case at the time of Toy Story. And Toy Story comes after Wall-E. I don't know. I
think that's a massive stretch there.
Well, I need to review my Pixar theory knowledge.
Well, because what happened? Yeah, because Wall-E is like at the beginning of the timeline, and then humans die out, and then I think it's either animals gain sentience in A Bug's Life or cars gain sentience and like I think it's cars after Wall-E because robots.
It's no, it's not. It's bugs. I remember
It's
this
bugs
because
first?
because then the bugs evolve and inside, and that's the car is their protective shell. They're actually bugs.
Oh no!
I remember
No,
that.
please stop.
Okay, and that tangent should be done.
No, we could. Oh, we should do a whole episode just like
On the
branching out the
Pixar
Pixar,
theory.
branching out from the Pixar theory, just hot takes about a cold theory. But yeah, so the thing is, this isn't like new, the story within a story thing. And there's been a lot of really good ones. And I really like the concept of story within a story where it's like, oh, this thing has this whole lore, this whole I'm using the like narrative in general to drive my own plot without actually giving you this narrative. And I think it says a lot about like what we do with stories. And it's like, oh, there's all this like not figurative language, but symbolism and all these things that we utilize to like get a meaning out of our stories, and even our characters get meanings out of stories that aren't quite real. One of my favorite examples, if you can tell by the way I introduced the podcast and my Zoom background, if you are watching on video, if you're listening on audio, I have a Zoom background of the fight between the man in black from The Princess Bride and Fezzik.
That's Inigo Montoya, isn't it?
Oh,
In the
Inigo
picture?
Montoya.
In the picture.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's Inigo, not Fezzik. Fezzik's later. Yeah. So this is between the Man in Black and Inigo Montoya. I should have gotten between. I guess it's not. It's not a whole lot of a fight. It's just the Man in Black dodging Fezzik. But yeah. So the Princess Bride. If you've seen the film, it's not quite as.
I mean,
I don't
it's
know.
still definitely a story within a story.
Yeah, it's not as quite in your face as like the way that the Princess Bride gets super meta. But like in the film, you know, you have little Fred Savage with his grandpa reading the book to him. So the story is you're hearing the story, but there's a like there's a level of like disconnect where it's like this is actually a story being told to someone, not you know the actual recounting. But if you've read the Princess Bride by let's see,
I think,
S. Morgenstern's the fake author,
and then
and then
William.
Is it
Gold,
Goldman or Goldman?
I think it's Goldman.
Goldman, William Goldman. So William Goldman, the actual person, wrote the book, and in the book there is a narrative of fake William Goldman, who is an author in his universe, that has a wife and a son that he doesn't really like either of them. Um, but like then he decides to connect with his son before he goes on a trip. He's like, "Oh, I'm going to give you this book that my grandpa read me when I was a kid. This is called The Princess Bride by or no, it's not called The Princess Bride in the thing. It's like the history of the country within The Princess Bride."
Florence or whatever it is.
Yeah, I should get these names right. I am on a computer. Country in The Princess Bride. Florin.
Florin.
But it's
Sorry,
like
Italy.
yeah, no, not Florence. But hey, both beautiful places. Anyway, the book by S. Morgenstern, who's like a historian. Yeah, The Princess Bride, S. Morgenstern's classic, is he gives this book to his son, and it's like, all right, I'm going on this trip. Tell me what you think of it when I get back. And then he comes back, and his son's like, oh yeah, chapter one was great. And he's like, why didn't you like it? It was full of adventure and fantasy. I thought this was something you might like. And then he looks at the story and he's like, oh, this is actually a history book that talks about like the economics and the politics and all
Yeah.
like the really mundane stuff about the country. And then his grandpa just picked out the interesting parts. So then the actual story of the Princess Bride that we know about the Man in Black and Inigo Montoya and Fezzik and then Princess Buttercup and all of them and all that whole journey they go on is actually what he calls the good parts version. And then the book he actually publishes within the book that is referencing another book within this book, all in one book.
And and the thing is, it's so good because William Goldman holds up the entire time that S. Morgenstern was a real author.
Mm-hmm.
And like even the books are sold on shelves in real life as The Princess Bride, by S. Morgenstern, abridged by William Goldman. And there's even like an intro, and like the 25th anniversary edition is like, yep, this is S. Morgenstern's book, but it's not.
It's
He's
such
not
a
real.
good ruse. It's like the world building to get to the world building is so funny because he has like, I have this really bad relationship with my wife and kids, and then at the end of the story he's like, I have a great relationship with my grandkid now, and it's like, it's this whole thing. It's weird. He's telling the story about how he wrote the story that is abridged from another story, and it's so interesting about like what it says about like stories we tell. And I think it's really cool that I care about all of these stories within a story, even though the main story is about Princess Buttercup and oh my goodness, the Man in Black. What is his real name?
Wesley?
Wesley. Um, I just couldn't think of anything. I'm just thinking of him falling down the hill, going "As you
The
wish."
Dread Pirate Roberts to some.
The Dread Pirate Roberts. Um, have a good night. I might kill you in the morning, or I'll most likely kill you in the morning. If you haven't seen The Princess Bride, it's a really good book. Um, but if you don't want to read the book, the movie is also very good and tells the most internal layer of the story of Wesley and Princess Buttercup. But then it's like if any of you are math people, like you've got the parentheses around that, and then you have more and more layers of parentheses that just extend. But anyway, the I guess the point I was trying to get at with talking about the Princess Bride is it just kind of shows how far you can go where it's still like a coherent narrative and you still have like things that you're interested in every single one of these stories. And I think it's the most extreme example I can think of story
Yeah.
within a story and how
It-
like getting meta.
It's definitely like my favorite of that kind of meta-ness. And I will like my girlfriend just started reading the book and I'm like trying to explain it and she's like, can I just read this? And I'm like, and I'm like foaming at the mouth because of like how cool I think it is.
Hmm. And then this is the only one I can think of though that has like complete like narrative of all of the layers of the story, because I feel like most of the time this is a plot device used whether it's in movies or in books, where like to hide information, where it's like I need something to inspire a message, but I don't want to write a whole nother like thing. It's like if someone wanted to write like a fantasy novel that involved like another language, but didn't go the whole like Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones route and actually write the entire language.
So Brendan, you mentioned the like, like math people with parentheses and parentheses. In a similar fashion, although not broken up, just in like the three-layer parentheses, is the book Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. Um, I'm holding it up to the screen now for you listeners at home.
I'm holding a fancy version.
I am holding a fancy version, and the inside kind of looks like black mold. But yeah. So if you've never read Mary Shelley's Frankenstein and you've only ever seen Frankenstein on pop culture, they're totally different. Besides the fact that Frankenstein is yellow in the books, and not green, but I had to read it in one of my classes at my community college. Thank you, Professor Johnson, for getting me really interested in Frankenstein. But it is a similar story within a story in the fact that it opens with the captain of an Arctic explorer vessel writing letters to his sister. And basically just talking about like, hey, I miss you. Like, it's been forever. Like, how's the family? And then it kind of goes in like the whole like first chapter is that. And then he's like, also, I have this passenger named like Victor Frankenstein. And like, yeah, he's here and he's like sick and like coughing, but like he wants to tell me the story. And then so it instantly jumps from this story about the captain in the Arctic to like a story told by his passenger. And so then Victor tells like the entire story of like how he went to college and how at college he created Frankenstein, which he's not even a doctor.
No, I gotta correct. At least when I read it and everything that I've learned, the monster's name is not Frankenstein.
No,
He's
it's
just
not.
Frankenstein's monster. Okay.
Yeah, I know. That's why how he created. They just call it the creature actually in the book. And so he goes through this whole section, and so it's this whole book from Victor's point of view, who's only in like his mid-20s, which I also think is really crazy. He's always shown as like an old man. And then you hit a point where Victor runs into the monster, and then the monster tells a story, and then suddenly the story is from the monster's point of view, and it's him telling this entire story. The monster's also has the capacity to learn really fast. Like he learns like a new language really fast. He analyzes, but he just doesn't understand emotion that well. He's also terrifying. He's superhuman strength, superhuman speed, and smart. It's like he's like a worse Hulk. Worse in that he kills people. And so then it kind of goes from this story, Arctic to Victor to monster, and like a whole different story. And then it kind of like goes back to it goes from the monster back to Victor, and at the end it goes from Victor back to the captain, and he's like, oh yeah, like back to talking to my sister about like my travels. And it's just kind of like this really interesting, like, you think it would just start beginning to end story about Victor, but it's like, no, it's three stories in one, really.
Mhm.
So I think that's pretty neat.
I think like one of my favorite things too is like there are some stories about the Mary Shelley writing it that basically she was told that a woman couldn't write Gothic literature and like a horror story, and she went, all right, challenge accepted, and went on to write Frankenstein and became a very well-known author for her time, especially being a woman.
Yeah, no. To create, she actually had to like basically like give the story like publish it for free in like newspapers as like an anonymous writer at first to actually get it going, circulating before people would be like, oh, I'm Mary Shelley. Oh, I wanted to go into this huge tangent about like why she wrote Frankenstein, but it's really dark and it doesn't actually have to do with story within a story, so I won't.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Hope.
Yeah. So for anyone watching on YouTube, my background is what is from the 7th Harry Potter movie. When they were settling the story of the three brothers, and when they met death and got the Deathly Hallows. But so before I go into talking about the story of the three brothers, I would like to honorable mention the story of the Marauders, because the fandom, not J.K. Rowling, but the fandom has created like this story within the Harry Potter story, but also like outside of the Harry Potter story. Because if you look up like anything about the four Marauders, which is James Potter, Remus Lupin, Sirius Black, and Peter Pettigrew, most of the information is not from J.K. Rowling. It's actually made up by fans. And this is courtesy of the Harry Potter Marauders era Dream cast, which includes Aaron Taylor Johnson as James Potter, Ben Barnes as Sirius Black, Andrew Garfield as Remus Lupin, and Jamie Bell as Peter Pettigrew. Which I find kind of hilarious that like the fandom just took fan fiction and essentially made it its own story, that anybody who's coming into Harry Potter now is like, oh, there's all this information about the Marauders, but they don't realize that it's not from J.K. Rowling, so they think it's a story within the story.
Well, a story within the universe,
Yeah.
right? Because
But
like it's like almost like a prequel series, but because I'd say it's because it's made by the fans. Maybe, yeah.
yeah, but like they also kind of talk about it because with the Marauders map, when Harry gets it in his 3rd year, because of the twins, which we all know the twins, when they both passed away, joined James, Sirius, and Remus up in the afterlife as part of the Marauders. But like you have the map, but then you also have when Snape is talking about James in the 6th one, especially when he's trying to get Harry to, or no, not the 6th one, the 5th one, where he's trying to get Harry not to like share his memories and stuff with Voldemort, because you get the stories from Snape's point of view, but you get it of like how the Marauders themselves were bullying Snape essentially. But so like there is a little bit of it within the stories because it gives that like background information and like twist on Snape and everything. But yeah, it's more within like the universe itself because of the fans making it. But in general, the Tales of Beetle Bard, we have the three brothers, which of course echoes in the story itself, especially towards the end of the books when you start to realize, and when we get all of the Deathly Hallows items, the cloak, the wand, and the stone, you start to realize that Voldemort, Snape, and Harry end up being the three brothers, and that Dumbledore's death, because he greeted each of them. And so it's just like this one specifically, like is just very much ingrained in the story itself too, like woven in, but it's given its own little story of like Yeah, so there were wizards and they cheated Death because he created this river that you couldn't get across without dying. And then they were like, oh, we have magic. Here, let's build a bridge. And Death was like, okay, I'll give you a prize. To essentially, the devil went down to Georgia them and try and trick them into dying early, which of course works for two older brothers, but not the youngest, because he's like, no, I want your cloak of invisibility. I don't want to, bring back someone I love or be the strongest and be boastful about it. Like, I just want to live my life. So, oh, well,
I'd take a cloak of invisibility over anything else. It's so cool.
You could break into the restricted section. And like, who doesn't want to break into the restricted section and find a book that screams at you?
Well, Hermione didn't
Yeah,
want to
why-
break into the restricted section.
That's fair.
She didn't like breaking rules until about year 4.
Why
Well,
do they
I
even
think she-
have a restricted section?
I think she liked breaking rules if she could find a loophole in them, because she was very clever that way of being like, see, you said this specifically, but you didn't say this, and I did that, and that's not in that rule. So that's what she did more. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. Actually, I think the turning point is when she just punches Malfoy in the nose. I think that just breaks. That's also one of the best
Yeah.
scenes in all of Harry Potter.
You
But
foul cockroach!
no, but I really love what the Tales of Beetle and Bard added to like the lore of the Harry Potter universe. Because like when you're reading it originally, it's like, oh, we know Harry's story, but we don't know much about like any kind of like past of like the wizarding world. Like the one thing that I know we don't have like a canon answer for yet, but we might get we get more clues in Fantastic Beasts, is like why the wizards are hiding away from the muggles, because there's like kind of hints that like there was a wizard muggle war that the muggles won.
Yeah.
That's like implied.
In the American version, specifically because you have the Salem witch trials, but I know that there were, especially when like Europeans were transitioning from pagan beliefs to Catholic and Christianity beliefs. I can't remember what the singular God word is.
Monotheistic.
Yes, monotheistic. Thank you. Like, they are very much anything to do with paganism. You're just like, you're dead, because that's basically what they did with the Vikings. And I told this to my family at dinner, but I don't think any of them were listening to me when I said it. I started a new show on Netflix called The Last Kingdom.
Oh.
And like,
Mm.
well, they were all busy in their own stuff, but I always laugh at the fact of like media portraying Vikings as like barbaric and awful, but in actuality they were like more civilized and way better with like governmental things than Europeans were.
No, there's like writings found where like men are complaining because like I would say English men are complaining because their wives prefer the like northern Scandinavian men because they say that they like bathe more often and that they're like and that like they smell nicer and they're like more but
Yes.
and so yeah, a lot of it was propaganda.
But yeah, well, okay, one more thing and then I'll go back to the
The
but
real story within a story within a story.
yeah. But the other thing about like Vikings was that women were often in charge of like the money, and like it was said that if a man cheated on his wife, like the women could basically make it so the guys couldn't reproduce anymore, because they were like, hey, you're equal to us. Like they had shield maidens and everything. Like women went and fought in the battles. But so European beliefs, and this is going back to like why wizards and witches would have had to hide, especially in like Europe versus America, because if they were thought to have pagan beliefs, it was like, oh, we're gonna have a war on you. So that's probably the war that you were referencing, Brendan, that we don't actually fully know about because it's not said. We just know the American version more because we know more about the Salem witch trials as Americans. But
Yeah, I think in most like beings with heightened powers over humans that are kind of subjugated by humans. I think like the default explanation is like, sure, one-on-one you're more powerful, but humans have strength in numbers, and there's
Humans
just
have guns.
humans also do have guns. That's the one thing that I never got about, like, why couldn't they just kill Voldemort by shooting him?
Oh, Muggle weapons.
Muggle weapons. Dang.
Well,
But
it's like the fan fictions now are like fan theories of like Muggle children, Muggle-borns sneaking in pens and like pencils and having a black market for these types of things instead of using quills to write and like.
tutoring them in like math and science instead of potions
Yep.
and defense against the dark arts. This is trigonometry. Oh wait, do you think that's what Hermione's Muggle Studies class was? Was just like Gen Ed high school curriculum?
I think in
Because
part,
well, I think
but
I think it's like them talking about Muggles themselves. In which case,
Yeah.
why didn't Harry take that class and ace it 100%?
because it's
Oh,
Harry
man.
Potter, he wants nothing to do
Maybe-
with Muggles because of his family.
Although my guess is it might have been kind of more like when in Avatar: The Last Airbender, when Aang goes to the Fire Nation as a student, and they're like, "Now, in this year, the Fire Nation destroyed the Air Nation army," and then they're like, "The Air Nation didn't have an army; they're monks." And he's like, "How would you know?"
Oh. Although I'm sure the Muggle Studies class, like, I'm sure there are plenty of Muggle-born students that like could correct anything like that.
Based on some of the games, I think like Muggle studies was more like events that happened in Muggle history versus like wizard history and stuff. And like, oh, here's a rubber duck. We still don't know what the function of a rubber duck is, but
That's a good joke. I love that one. Or do you think they went like, all right, you know how we have a currency system that makes no sense? Yeah, the 7 Canucks equals equals a sickle, and like how many sickles equals a galleon?
Yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
like 5 sickles equals a
And they're
gallon.
like, yeah, they do this weird system in base 10. Um, or yeah, they have this thing called Keynesian economics. Just things like that. But also like with going back to Tales of Beetle the Bard, it's not just the story of the 3 brothers, but there's all these like other like children's stories that the book actually got published. And it did and I have it back home, and I'm like, okay, that's really funny because it starts off with just adding this lore to like the Harry Potter series about like the history of the Wizarding World, the kind of the deeper powers that kind of like run through magic, like with the 3 Hallows. Because have you heard the theory that like there were either precursors or attempts to recreate all of the Hallows, and we see them throughout the 7 books?
yes.
And it's the Mirror of Erised is the wand, because it can show you what you want but cannot give it to you. The veil in the Department of Mysteries is the stone because it can take you to the other side, but it can't bring you back.
Yeah.
I can't bring people back. And then the pensive
Oh yeah, that was the last one. Yeah.
is for the invisibility cloak. You can go revisit your memories and move around and interact and be there without actually being there, but you can't do it in the present time.
Yeah.
So I thought that was pretty cool, and it kind of gave more meaning to those objects that originally were just like, oh, this is kind of like a plot device. It's like, no, they kind of exist in the universe for a reason. And even some of the other stories kind of add to the idea of like, this is what wizard children learned about, and these are the lessons important to the Wizarding World. What was it? Hibbity Bibbity and her cackling stump.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, and like my other thing is it creates an order for the magic too. Like magic isn't the highest power because death's items are still stronger than magic items. Like even the Philosopher's Stone or Sorcerer's Stone, whichever you want to call it, with Nicholas Flamel, like, you know, that, I mean, granted, you have the wand that Harry just goes, snap, toss, and it's gone. But like the idea that death can just create these items for the brothers is a superseding magic and is stronger than wizarding magic. So wizards can't just live forever, as much as like the old tales of Merlin suggest, or, you know. what they were trying to do with in the Three Brothers. But I also would like to point out the fact that like Ron, when Hermione is given the book in the series, and Ron was like, "Oh, I know that. Mom read it to us like every night when we were kids." He's like, "Didn't you guys read it?" And I had this thought earlier, and I was like, "No, Ron. They learned Muggle fairy tales. They did not learn Wizarding fairy tales."
Check your ignorance, Ron.
Yeah, Ron, you were our fairy tales.
Yeah, exactly. Because they learned about werewolves and witches, and yeah.
Things that actually exist in the wizarding world.
I have a theory that the Brothers Grimm and Hans Christian Andersen and oh my gosh, who was the other one? Were all wizards in their
That
own
were
right.
cast out from the wizarding world for telling the muggles.
Yeah.
They do mention like some characters that were like wizards, which I think is pretty cool lore. I remember I looked up to see if Shakespeare was, but it's like Shakespeare was a muggle, like officially in the world. But it's like some wizards still like appreciated his work. And I was like, that's pretty cool.
And it's cool lore building. And I think that's kind of the function of this story within a story. And I think Lightyear is just kind of like continuing that narrative of like, oh yeah, this builds to the world that we've already created, and also creating another world, and kind of adds that level of depth. One story within a story that I thought was really funny. Have either of you read or seen The Fault in Our Stars by John Green?
Yes.
So you know the book that Hazel reads in
Yeah.
in The Fault in Our Stars. What's it called? It's an Imperial Affliction.
Yeah.
An Imperial Affliction
Yeah.
by
Mhm.
Peter Van Houten, and that's like not a real book, but I remember John Green wrote like for the film had to write like 7 pages of like random stuff, and like they just reprinted the pages, the same like 7 pages, into like a book that Hazel could read, that Shailene Woodley could read as Hazel in the movie. And then there are copies of that 7 pages as a book floating around, because in one of their charity events, for the Project for Us, the Green Brothers printed a couple out and gave them to people that donated to the charitable foundations. And so I thought that was really cool. It started off just as like this, plot device, need this for Hazel's character development. Or I guess John Green doesn't really do plot, but like, yeah. And then it turned into this like mini story that now people are like searching for and trying to figure out like what it says. I just thought that was really funny because it's posthumous world building. It's like, oh, I mentioned this little thing and now I need to elaborate.
Yeah. I mean, that's all J.K. Rowling does is posthumous world building.
I guess. Good point. Same with
Yeah.
the other major culprit is George Lucas.
Yeah.
Posthumous world building. Except I can't think of it. I tried to think of this in Star Wars. There isn't anything in Star Wars except maybe the Jedi texts that like I don't know, like there aren't like books in the Star Wars universe. Or
okay, there's not stories, but I mean, there's like the Temple of the Wills that they mentioned in what is it? Rogue One. It's George Lucas like originally created all of Star Wars as if it was a story being retold by R2D2 to these people that are like the priests of the Wills, and it's spelled with there's an H in there. And it's kind of like that's why R2D2 is like there in every movie. It's because he's like the story keeper. He has the story, and that was like George Lucas's original vision. And then so
isn't the
that's
priests
just,
of
like,
the
a fun
Wills?
book.
Don't they show up in season 6 of Clone Wars in that episode with Yoda? Isn't that it?
Is that it? Are those the people that show him how to be a Force ghost?
Yes.
Hold on. Let me double check. I don't know.
Other like
Wills.
mini like stories within a story that I do like though is it's not even a story within a story, but like the song Monster Mash, we don't know what the actual Monster Mash dance is because they don't describe the dance, but they do the dance, the Monster Mash. That is not the song, the Monster Mash.
Yeah, Monster Mash is just talking about the party, in which case the aforementioned song title was done. Dracula and his son. I just know that they're there.
There's other songs
Yeah,
that
the
do that
Shaman
too.
of the Wills.
Yes.
The Shaman of the Wills are the ones that taught Qui-Gon Jinn how to be a Force ghost, and later he taught Yoda how to be a Force ghost. So look at that. It's all connected.
It's all coming together. Then there's
Jar
also
Jar
like
is the key.
Darth Jar Jar. But then there's also like songs that like talk about other songs. What is it? The One Direction song, best song ever.
Breck,
We danced all night to the best song ever, and we
um,
don't know what the best song ever is, but it's not like
One Direction is the only group that can claim that they have the best song ever, and literally mean they have the best song ever.
I'm sure there's other people that like have called their song best song ever.
I don't think so.
I know
Well-
that song from SpongeBob, "The Best Day Ever."
But it's not the best song ever.
One sec. Best song ever. Okay.
I was gonna mention "Breakfast at Tiffany's," the song that talks about the movie Breakfast at Tiffany's.
Yes. That as well. That weird level of meta. Songs are a really actually good place for that like meta. Where it's like, oh, we're doing this thing and watching this thing that references this other thing that either doesn't exist or like I'm supposed to be like a part of and I'm within that world. So, absolutely.
Yeah.
So overall, I feel like story within a story is a really fun. It's a really fun way to like get deeper into the lore of a world. Oh,
I just thought of another one.
go
And
for it.
it's not like movie or anything, but Wicked. Wicked is technically a story within a story. And I'm talking about the musical because I didn't ever finish the book. Sorry to my sister, but she hasn't watched this, so it doesn't matter. But because at the beginning of the musical, they're like, the witch is dead. She's dead, the wicked witch is dead. Blah, blah, blah. And they're like, Linda, how did you know her? And she goes into talking about how they met and it progresses to Alphaba's death. And then like back to Glinda telling the people of
Munchkin Town.
Munchkin
Yeah.
Land.
That like, oh yeah, this is how we knew each other and she's dead now, so yay. And then also like going off of that too, like the end of Wicked, you have two of the characters going off. I'm not going to say which, for if you haven't seen it, you need to go see it. But Gregory Maguire actually wrote a series too of like Alphaba's son and everything, and Son of a Witch, and there were a couple others too that were like based off of kind of like stories within the stories more and continuation of the stories. But I just remembered that Wicked musical specifically is, like Princess Diaries, The Princess Bride, where someone is telling the story and then we get put into the story.
And I know I mentioned this in our group chat earlier, but in the newest Eternals trailer, they're talking about Icarus, and the kid's like, "Oh, he's like Superman. He was shooting lasers out of his eyes." I'm like, "Okay, so DC Comics exist in the MCU," which is really funny. But then if you watch the CW shows, specifically The Flash, Cisco like mentions Marvel a lot. So like in their respective like popular media universes, the other comic franchises exist, but not the like ones that they're representing. And I think that's really, really funny. And I'd love to see like, I know that it's just a throwaway line, and I think that's also kind of like fun world building. It's like, oh, it has this like thing in common with our world that kind of mirrors the story that they're telling, and that's really cool. But I'd love to see a little more exploration of like, oh, what do the Marvel heroes think about the DC heroes in the comic books?
Also, this was mostly explored in Agent Carter, but it was also mentioned in The Avengers because Phil Coulson had the trading cards for Captain America. But in Agent Carter, you get the radio show that was Captain America at the time of like him fighting Nazis and everything with the very girly and damsel in distress Peggy Carter. But so there's also, so like you talk about having the like DC and Marvel having the opposite people, the other people's comics in there as it, but like Captain America technically has his own comics within the Marvel universe
Oh
because
yeah, he does.
If you played Square Enix's Avengers game, like one of the things is collecting comics of the heroes that you're playing as. It's like of the collectibles. But then I'm thinking like, are we getting into like the boys level like comic book meta analysis of like, oh, they not only are heroes, but they also are like pop stars and are in their own movies and comic books and write their own stories, and those stories are actually based off their lives. So that's another level of meta where it's like, okay, we have this thing that wouldn't be the same if it actually existed. Like if like tomorrow, some if tomorrow Elon Musk like came on and was like, I am Iron Man, and like or had something like that, had his own like, or like I am SpaceX Man or anything like that, and all of a sudden we had like the blossoming of superheroes and supervillain battles, and everyone's insurance rates rose really high. Yeah. Then that would change what comic books mean, because, or at least superhero comic books, because now that exists in real life and that has to mirror that. And I feel like that's a really weird like meta analysis that I feel like could go in depth talking about comics within comics. So
Okay. Now I have a really quick question. Hannah Montana. Is it a story within a story?
I feel like that's a weird gray area, seeing as her name. So since she's Miley Stewart and not Miley Cyrus, I feel like that's just parallelism.
I'm just talking the show, like not real world, just going with the show itself.
A story within a story. No, because I wouldn't say, because that story is about having the dual identity, not about, because
they do have the Hannah Montana stories that are, the gossip because she's a celebrity within the universe that Hannah and Miley are technically not part of, or like creating themselves. It's the media creating the stories.
Yeah, but that's just like real life too. Interesting. But anyway, as always here on Raving Geeks, we'd like to end with some recommendations for our viewers, whether that be movies, video games, comics, or anything else geeky. Either of you got anything that you are dying to recommend to our viewers?
Yeah. I have a few things. One, of course, is the entire Lord of the Rings book series and The Hobbit, because technically that's a story within a story. It's all in the Red Book of Westmarch. Read about it. That'd be a whole 2-hour episode just me talking about that. I just finished Squid Game. That was really good. I think people should enjoy that.
We're going to talk about this once we're done recording.
I just finished it. Yep. And then my girlfriend and I just started Only Murders in the Building, which is like the drama comedy murder show with Steve Martin, Martin Short, and Selena Gomez, and it is really good. And it's very like true crime, aspect of it, and it was created by Tina Fey, and it's just good. I recommend it.
All right. My recommendation is The King on Netflix. It's a film. It is rated R, not for like the sex or anything, but more for the fact that there is a literal scene where you literally watch a guy's head get chopped off into blood, and so it's gore that way. But it's Timothy Chalamet, who like I just found out is older than me. He's 25, born in December of 1995, and I'm like, I thought you were 21. He's older, and it's weird to think about it. But so the movie is The King. So Netflix, words, Wikipedia describes it as an epic war film, but it's actually based on several plays from William Shakespeare's Henriade, which I found really interesting that they used plays from him, which it's William Shakespeare, who doesn't use something of his at this point. Which could also be an episode of us debating about whether William Shakespeare actually wrote all of his stuff or not. But so it also has Sean Harris and Lily Rose Depp. Robert Pattinson is in it, and Robert Pattinson plays the French prince, and he has this French accent that his voice goes higher pitched, and it's weird but also comical, which it's supposed to be. But
he's supposed to talk. He's not supposed to talk like this, or no?
He does talk like that, but it's a little bit higher pitched than that.
Oh, he does not talk like this or no?
Yeah.
Like this? Peut-être? Non, je ne sais pas.
But I thought it was really good. And like Timothy Chalamet, like his character goes from being like essentially the playboy of his era to having to be king in a matter of a few days. Essentially, the movie makes it.
So most French princes.
No, Timothy Chalamet is the English prince, and it's actually that his father, King Richard, had told him that his brother was actually Prince Thomas was going to be the next king instead of him, even though he was the oldest, because his brother was actually like paying attention to what was happening in the politics and stuff, and being a good little son like they should be. But obviously things happen, and Timothy Chalamet's character Hal becomes king of England. But it was really good, and like his acting skills, for the most part, he's just having to like sit there and be serious. And like there are some actors that do that and they just look bored, but he actually looked like invested, but still like the seriousness of it. And I was really impressed with how well he acted in that movie. So yeah, that's my recommendation.
Nice. Yeah, so I recommend, if you have not watched it already, watching the show Big Mouth. Season 5 comes out next week, so I might rewatch it just to catch up and make sure I remember where they're at. I also, if you're a big fan of Dragon Ball Z or Dragon Ball Super, the original Dragon Ball show, which I didn't know like was available in the United States, is on Hulu. So that is something that it is dated a little bit. But also, I don't think it's a show, but if you are also interested in Dragon Ball, the Akira Toriyama's other work, Dr. Slump, is also something that's worth looking into, especially if you saw that episode of Dragon Ball Super that had the main character of that, who is not Dr. Slump, but her name is Arale, show up in that episode. But yeah, I was also going to recommend Squid Game, so that has been, I know a lot of you, almost everyone has seen it, but I highly recommend, even if you don't think it's your thing. It's really, really good, and it's a really, really good like subplot beyond like the original, like the what you think is the main plot. So yeah,
I will say I don't plan on watching it personally, but for those of you who are thinking about it, it is you either have to do subtitles or listen to the English dub. So
I did both.
Wait, why don't you want to watch it, Hope?
The fact of a doll that shoots you and it's a giant doll, I'm not a fan of that. Like
The doll doesn't shoot you.
The doll doesn't shoot you.
The doll is still creepy, and I don't do creepy dolls.
That's
It's not a doll. It's a statue.
It's
of
like
a doll.
And also, it's in one episode for like 10 minutes. And like, it's not the point of the show. You need to watch this show.
I'm also
like,
not
seriously.
good. So like, because I'm so ADHD, if I have subtitles on or like captions, even if it's an English show, I'll be reading the captions and focused on that more than like what's actually happening, and like I'll miss stuff on the screen. I'm not a person who can do that, and then I get really annoyed with the whole your mouth is doing one thing but it's not matching the words that are coming out of the speakers. So like that's my other thing. I really only have watched a few foreign productions. One of them was it was called The Bicycle Thief, which was an Italian film, and it's an older film. It's in black and white, and that one I had to watch for a film class, and like I actually kind of enjoyed it, but I was still like kind of frustrated just me not being able to focus on everything that I can usually focus on with American English movies. So
Well, I don't look at people's faces when I watch things anyway, so it doesn't bug me. Which sucks, because unless they wear really distinct clothing, which they don't in Squid Game, that means because I don't look at facial features, it takes me a long time to distinguish who's who. But luckily they have numbers on there, so it only took me memorizing the numbers.
Yeah. I mean, the numbers whittle down too.
But yeah, once there were no longer 400 numbers and only like 50, it got a lot easier. But anyway, that's all we have for y'all today. Thank you all for joining us here on Raving Geeks. Make sure you leave a comment wherever you're listening from. We love to hear what you all thought from today's episode. Reach out to us on Facebook, Twitter, or TikTok at Raving Geeks. And as always, I've been Brendan Valentine alongside my fellow co-hosts.
Hope good, Earl.
And I am the monster of Isaac Hunter.
Stay geeky and have a great week, everyone. Good night. Or
Yeah.
good morning.
Good day.
Good day, mate.